Hey everyone, and welcome back to Ask a Sister. I'm Sarah, and happy Thursday. Last week I talked a little bit about two forms of poetry, Instagram and prose. This week is I'm gonna go kind of on the poetry scale because the two books I am using as examples are poetry, but this doesn't just go for poetry. Today's gonna be a little bit about publishing, a little bit about self-publishing, some like when you submit to a literary magazine and such, like do's and don'ts. Now, I've never submitted, so I am going to provide that disclaimer now. But these are things I picked up from other people that have, such as my peers, such as my professors that have told me, like, yeah, this is great, but if you were to submit this to a publisher to get published, there's a chance that, like, hey, yeah, they're not going to want this, this, and this. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to go ahead and start with Rupi Kaur. Again, controversial within the poetry community as professionals. Today I'm using it more as a different example. So most of my books that are poetry, I see that they all come from a very similar publisher, which is Andrews McKeel Publishing. Now, my guess is, I don't know. I'm assuming this is she went through a publishing house. That is my assumption. But it is also very common to see self-publishing, which is you don't go through a publishing house, so you do everything yourself. It's very unlikely that you have an editor provided to you, so you have to find that. You have to do it yourself, one of the two. And it's very unlikely that you have any help within the publishing industry. So you're responsible for everything, including your advanced copies, all that jazz. So, but another thing, like when it comes to the general of publishing, I'm assuming Rupi, because this is her book, she does have illustrations on most of her pages to go with her poems. If you are submitting to a literary magazine, most likely they might take the poem, but they may not take the images. And that's nothing to be worried about. Make sure it's like if you're writing a poem and you want to submit it, make sure your poem can stand alone if you're going to get it for publishing in such thing as a magazine, because it's going to be up to them what they want. They're going to be picky about what they want and what they don't want. Okay, so another thing when it comes to publishing, especially when I'm publishing in like a magazine, if your poem, if its text is in color, most likely what will happen will be they will most likely change it to all black, or they just won't accept it. You can chance it, but I wouldn't recommend it. Now, if you're publishing your own book, such as Amanda Lovelace did in her Women Are Some Kind of Magic series, she did her 3 books. One is in black ink. The first one is just in black ink. It's fine. The next one, which is The Witch Doesn't Burn in this one, is the print is in red. So this was fine because it's her own book, it's her own adaptation. But if you're going to write a poem and you're submitting it, you're going to probably want to make sure all of your text is in black. I wrote a poem for one of my classes, so it's not published or anything. And I used green and a dark yellow because I was writing about bamboo and mine was dying at the time. So it was the class, like everyone in the class enjoyed it. They were giving me the critiques on it, but my professor told me, because I'm not the only one that's ever used like color on their poems for classes. they're like, yeah, this is great, I understand what you're doing here, but if you were to submit this to get published, you would probably have to put it in all black because they're probably not going to want to print this in color. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. So I thought I would pass that tip along to all of you as well. Unlike Rupi, as far as, okay, so Rupi uses a lot more images. It's very rare for me to find things in Amanda Lovelace's books. It does happen, but they're not nearly as much. Let's see. Back to publishing for, like, the publishers for a minute. When I say most of my books that I have are Andrews McKeel Publishing, I don't know if they're a publishing house per se, or if they are a publishing house, but they also do self-publishing. This is their symbol is going to be in the back and on the spine on the bottom, most likely. That's common. I've never had anything published. I hope to one day, and I hope that if you all are wanting to, I hope that this video helps you a little bit. So happy Thursday. Bye.